Welcome to Poetry is Normal Presents at the Normal Public Library, virtually. Poetry is Normal Presents is our guest poet series, supported by the Normal Public Library Foundation, and it alternates monthly with Poetry is Normal, our open mic. Tonight we have as our guest poet, Andrea Potos. We're very glad to have her. I am Kathleen Kirk, and I'm here in a Zoom room with Andrea and John Fisher, who's broadcasting on Facebook Live for us. And so if you're listening and viewing and you discover that you have any comments or questions for Andrea, tonight's guest poet, feel free to type them in. And later on in the program, we'll check with John Fisher and pass your comments or your questions along to her. Andrea Potos is the author of several poetry collections, including Marrow of Summer, her newest book that I have read, which is so beautiful, from Kelsay Books, and Mothershell, A Stone to Carry Home, and Ink Like Early Twilight, and Arrows of Light. She has received the William Stafford Prize in Poetry and several Outstanding Achievement Awards in Poetry from the Wisconsin Library Association. And that's a wonderful thing about our virtual series is even though we're not live in our cafe as usual, we can have poets from all over. So we have Andrea from Wisconsin. Yay! Her poems are all over the place. Recently in Spirituality and Health magazine, I was happy to find them there. That's a magazine that I get as a gift from a friend. Poetry East, One Art, Buddhist Poetry Review, and elsewhere. Andrea lives in Madison, Wisconsin, where she used to be a bookseller. And I'm hoping she'll tell us a little bit about her life in books as well as her life in poetry and everything you want to tell us about your poems. Andrea, it's all you.
Oh, that sounds wonderful. Kathleen, what a wonderful introduction. Thank you. I'm really honored to be asked to do this. It's been lovely to meet you and to talk with you, and thank you very much. And so I guess, why don't I just read the opening poem to Marrow of Summer? I don't think this one needs an introduction, but the book is interesting. It happened quite organically that it starts in May and it ends. There's a lot of summer in the book, and then it ends in winter, dreaming of summer. So I find that it's a very seasonal book, really. I didn't even consciously plan that, but it happened, which was kind of lovely when that happened. So, before waking in May. There they are, as if on the stillest pond surface, your crumpled griefs and nibbling fears, scenes of the ways you have disappointed yourself, friendship threads frayed or dissolved. Yet still you fold aside the blankets, fluff your pillows and get up. There's no mistaking the resident cardinals shouting at you through the window screen. When you raised the shades, you noticed the emerged leaves of late May. They have only deepened their green after rain. And I write very often of my Yaya, was my maternal grandmother. Yaya is grandmother in Greek. I write a lot about the Greek-American ancestry, and she's been a great inspiration for me, and she was quite the creator, not a writer, but a creator in many other ways. And after all these years, I'm still writing about her, and this is one of those poems. It's called Creating. I think of my Yaya all those hours at her Singer sewing machine, or sitting with her skeins of yarn, or the thimble on her finger as she basted and lined the pleats of the drapes, the hems of the dresses and shirts and coats, as she embroidered the doilies and linens, the pillowcases and sheets. All I have are my pens, scatterings of dark blue or black, sometimes purple or green, depending on the mood. Hoping my hand aligns somehow with hers as I make small stitches of words across paper that sometimes feels like rough cotton, sometimes like silk. And I do love the silky kind of pages. I search for notebooks that have that very particular feel. It's not always easy to find. I had the honor 2 summers ago of having a mother robin, build her nest above my lamp box on my porch. I was quite just so agog at the whole experience watching it. And this is for that robin, who I actually named Alice Jane. For the robin on my porch. How lucky for me that my lamp box ledge became your chosen landing. Hour by hour I witnessed your skills, diving and swooping under the eave with supplies gleaned from early spring earth and winter dregs. You made it look so seamless, circles of twig and grass, some damp sculpting of mud. I swore for a moment I saw my daughter's frayed, pale blue ribbon woven in. My daughter on her own 1,000 miles from us now, while you made the place from where your beloveds may soar. Another nostalgic kind of poems, a poem. I'm a big coffee love, but I like the simple, well, this poem tells it all. You'll see what I like. In praise of old coffee makers. My mother's Mr. Coffee, 4 cups in all, enough for both of us, gurgling a good morning from her galley kitchen counter when I'd come for overnights. My yaya's stainless steel pot on the front burner of her stove when I was a girl at her table. The dark liquid poppied and burbling up as if silently singing into the clear glass knob and waiting to be poured. Black with a dollop of whole milk, nothing fancy or pressed or flavored, only itself like a staple of love. One of the joys of the day is waking up to the coffee, isn't it? But, and one thing that occurred to me is, especially during the COVID time, was just to have a day or two away from your regular surroundings is so restorative. And last spring, my husband and I took a weekend in Door County in a little cabin, and it really just did amazing wonders. This poem came from that experience. Weekend away. To be immersed, even briefly, in small pools and streams of the new, though you know you are still a self with all edges and frailties. For these 3 days, to be lifted like a gift, shining from the box of your life. I very much welcome those days. So the year before that, before COVID, another way that I was lifted out of my life was when we were in Britain. London is one of my favorite cities. And this was one of, not certainly the first time I'd been to London, and this poem speaks to that. What did you do in London, I was asked. Circled the tombs of the Scots Queen and the first Elizabeth finally united in stone. Napped on the grass of Queen Mary's garden, as if underwater with sunlight and hyacinths. Stepped inside the lobby of the Ritz, down the hushed rose-carpeted stairs. I might have heard the swish of Audrey Hepburn's gown. Sat in the bedroom of John Keats, a spinning around my heart like a bird. Perhaps his nightingale arrived from the branches of longing and dream. And if you know my work, you know that I'm a big John Keats love, and I have many poems to him, about him, from him, whatever. And each book seems to have something of John in it. This This one has a few too. I won't read all those, but just you should know that. Oh, here's one. Sorry, I have to read this because someone did say this to me about using these words in a poem, and as when I feel particularly reactive from somebody saying something like that, I feel inspired to write a poem. Truth, beauty. Poet friends have cautioned me about using those words. They were John Keats's after all, and he is long dead. Hasn't the 19th century gone the way of London fog, chamber pots, whalebone corsets? No one, I was told, will believe those words in a poem with no modern ground to plant them, ominously perched as they are on precipices of prayer. So I still use those words. A lot of this book, not a lot actually, some of this book is for my mother who left us from lung cancer in 2016. The cardinal reminds me. It sweeps and arcs across my path almost every day on my walk to the cafe. Under sun or cloud, its red seems lit from inside, a brightness bold as the lipstick my mother wore, no matter the day or the time, no matter how near to the end she got, even 2 days before the last. The young, dark-haired nurse applying it for her, while I sat near, my own lips trembling from fear or hope. I could not tell. I could not separate anything, not now either. The bright flame of this bird, recalling me to loss or to joy. The two, loss and joy, seem so inextricably linked for me. In fact, there's an epigraph to this book from the poet Charles, I don't know how you pronounce it, Chigna, from one of his books on creativity, and it really struck me. He says, "Do not tell the world your pain. Show it the joy of your tears." I just love that. I'm not even sure what it means, but whatever it is, it's right. You know what I mean?
Andrea?
Yes.
Andrea, I am so glad you read us your epigraph. That was one of my questions for you. And it struck me too when I opened the book and read that, and then thought of it in the context of the whole book, that's exactly it. So thank you so much. Would you read that again, the epigraph again?
Yes. Do not tell the world your pain. Show it the joy of your tears. Do you too feel, Kathleen, like the sort of inner rightness of that?
I do.
Yeah.
I really do. That it's and when you do that, of course, you are showing the world your pain, but you're not stressing it. You're not focusing on the pain part. You're allowing the reader to encounter the pain or share their own pain by showing the joy of your tears. It just moved me very much, and so do your poems. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I was so struck by that, and I knew it belonged in the epigraph because I there is a lot of loss through a lot of my work, but I don't feel like I ever settled there, and I don't want to settle there because there's been so much joy and growth also that I want to carry along with that. And so I think that's what he was doing for me with that quote. He's a very interesting man. Well, still on that topic, I will read on the anniversary of my mother's passing. This summer day, the clouds are hues of moonstone and the insides of abalone shells. A slate blue and a pale coral pink of a sky where the sun might be setting, or it might be rising. You're not sure which. The way you could say the body is dying or the spirit is waking up. All the perspective there. And I had a very dear friend die of a glioblastoma 3 falls ago. And I visited him in the hospice the last days, visiting the hospice. And it really struck me what a place of beauty it was. This was a Grace Hospice in Madison. It's just kind of a reverent kind of, it felt almost church-like, but not in a religious way. It just felt very holy, sort of. Anyway, I tried to express it in the poem. Visiting the hospice. Call it heaven already. Air of ochre light, art on the walls, a mosaic Balinese dancer, a cathedral of orchids. I glimpse side rooms filled with books, leather sofas to sink inside, windows with green views of paths winding somewhere I cannot see. Along the spacious hallways, no one hurries. Each person who greets me carries a stillness I long to keep. My friend sleeps most of the day now. At the door of his room, I pause, knowing the safety of his passage. It did feel like that kind of safe and still, holy kind of place. And I think before we began tonight, Kathleen asked me about where the title of the book came from. Right? Should I read that one now and speak to that one?
Yeah, thank you.
Well, I was thinking, this poem is dedicated to all the beloveds gone on, and I think about always where I feel them or sense them or how to locate them in place and memory and time and beyond time. And this poem just really kind of swooped in and took me. I was thinking about that, where to find them. If a scent had wings whisking past you, sunk in the haymows of your longing, beyond the last camera roll, stitched inside the heart's silk repository, inside the sealed envelopes of this world, within the marrow of every summer there ever was or will be. It's really a list poem, I think. I hope that came through. Maybe, okay, like Kathleen mentioned before, I'll read it one more time. Where to find them. If a scent had wings whisking past you, sunk in the haymows of your longing, beyond the last camera roll, stitched inside the heart's silk repository, inside the sealed envelopes of this world, within the marrow of every summer there ever was or will be. I love the idea of summer's marrow. And speaking of summer, I'll read one more sad poem from the book. But I don't feel it's sad, really. You tell me what you think, Kathleen, because you know the book now. June Memoriam. The green warm season has come round, the months of leavings, aged and newer. My mother, my father, my baby uncle gone long before I was here. All returned, now in the deep emerald dreaming, shadows and flickering light. Time has woven a nest for loss.
Yes, lovely.
I do feel that time has woven a nest for loss. That's very real to me. And I'll read one more poem from Marrow of Summer. And I was thinking about when beginning the poem, and after I wrote this and many people read it, and they told me that they felt it applied to many things besides when beginning a poem. And it's sort of interesting to look at it that way now. When beginning the poem, may there be a listening rather than a making, curiosity over expectation, lightness and ease, no straining towards some glut of air. May you step aside like a watcher at the meadow's edge as the doe finds her way to the center. So that's from Marrow of Summer, and I will pick up Mothershell, which, can you see that? Okay, good. Another volume from Kelsay Books. They really do beautiful creations. And the epigraph from this is from my love, John Keats, from Endymion. And of course, this is a very well-known passage. A thing of beauty is a joy forever. Its loveliness increases. It will never pass into nothingness, but still will keep a bower quiet for us, and a sleep full of sweet dreams and health and quiet breathing. I think I'll read that again too. It feels like a prayer, sort of. A thing of beauty is a joy forever. Its loveliness increases. It will never pass into nothingness, but still will keep a bower quiet for us, and a sleep full of sweet dreams and health and quiet breathing. It's so quiet in its own way, isn't it? Oh, two more coffee poems. Actually, two more coffee poems. My mother and I, one of the things we loved to do was go out for meals together, especially breakfast. And I feel like we're still having breakfast together. So I titled this poem, Breakfast Eternal. The clearness of seeing in the corner booth still, her senior special. 2 hot cakes, 2 sausages and eggs over easy, a side of wheat toast doused in butter, the 2 of us here again. Her dark pink smile, Greek skin, still lovely after 80 plus years. Her face, etched so certainly upon this air, filled with the reassuring clatter of voices and dishes that does not stop. I love it here, she tells me again. Isn't life as certain as it ever was? She and I, face to face, drinking our coffee, black and filled to the top. And then we love to travel in our family, and when my daughter was 10, we took our first trip to Rome. And this was outside the place where we stayed outside a convent, we stayed in a convent, which was just beautiful, on Piazza Farnese. A Rome morning. I sat al fresco in the cafe, with St. Brigida's bells ringing, young nuns gliding past me, shoe clatter on cobblestones, a drill in distant alleyways. 2 old men, cigarettes in their mouths and newspapers tucked under their arms, bickered past me, while Bernini's bathtub fountain kept up its quiet gurgle. I sipped my cafe, spread my notebook open. Looking up, I saw my daughter leaning out the convent window in the room where we'd slept like angels the night before. She found me down here, her hair, her wave, all of her, igniting in the Italian light. And Italy, which is a very, very compelling place. Have you ever been, Kathleen or John?
Yes. Talk about beauty.
Yes. Yeah, it's almost overwhelming sometimes. So, remembering Italy 1 year later, it is the cappuccino I return to, ring of milk baked into the porcelain rim of cup. Around me, bicycles on cobblestones, sheets and towels waving from high green shutters. That bronze-hued center without bitterness or sweet, but somewhere in the perfection of the middle. Loved the coffees. Okay, 2 poems for Mom. How are we doing on time? Are we good?
Okay. Yes, we're good. We're fine. Okay.
With my mother at her chemo appointments. I would accompany her every week, and it was really a great experience, actually. Past the sun-flooded atrium, through the swinging doors to Infusion Bay, room 4 was our favorite. Nurse Brenda with her luxurious curls, connecting the clear plastic bag of potion, we joke, to that port, that door not far from my mother's heart. I found the chair beside her. She would lean back, smile, and sigh, the grace of her filling the air through those 3 hours we were together. I would breathe the stillness of presence, what she taught me, hers and mine, and the terror of not knowing. All I could do was stay. And since I'm reading title poems, I will read the title poem to Mothershell. My friend Sally Knacker is a absolutely marvelous poet. I really recommend her book called Night Snow. And this epigraph came from one of her poems in Night Snow about her mother passing away. I think you'd love her book, Kathleen. Mothershell. And this is the epigraph. Death is what mothers do alone. Daughters cannot come along or pause the creaking boat. A small current was all it took to usher you out onto that strip of silver light laid down for you, the relief of your smile meeting the stars. I knew I had no say in any of it. I stand here now, gathering shells whenever they appear. I hold them up to my ears. On certain days, inside their silence I can hear the echoes of your voice. And one of my favorite activities with my friend Katrin is we love to go to the Art Institute of Chicago. Chicago's about a 2.5-hour drive. We go there every couple of months, I remember. And this was in the room of the Impressionists at the Art Institute of Chicago. Too tired to roam anymore through the maze of galleries, I found the polished wood bench. Before me, an arc of school children on the floor, a French teacher gesturing with her hands, her voice an impassioned plea for the great canvas of Calibo behind her. Paris Street, rainy day, 1877. The shining wet cobblestones and star-shaped intersection, the city dwellers chatting and strolling under their gray umbrellas. I have long forgotten all my college French. I can't tell you what she is saying. I'm letting my eyelids close and hearing the clip-clopping of horses, the carriages hurrying past, raindrops drumming their music on the awning of the cafe. If you've been to the Art Institute and you walk into the Impressionist room, it's right there. It's just enormous, taking up one whole wall. It's just an exquisite painting. Another thing I love to do is visit cemeteries, especially cemeteries of beloved authors. Let's see, I've been to Wordsworth, Keats, Louisa May Alcott, Ralph Waldo Emerson, Emily Dickinson. I know there's more. I love cemeteries. And the cemetery in Concord, Massachusetts is so atmospheric. Sleepy Hollow Cemetery, where Louisa is buried with Henry Thoreau. So when we went to visit her grave, I was very struck by it. So much was on it. List for a grave. One-chambered nautilus amidst a crowd of pennies shining in smudged dark. An arc of pens fanned out above your name, pencils with teeth marks, chipped erasers, evidence of minds working in your wake. One crocheted flower, one guitar pick beside a flat, wide stone, wait for a folded sheet of paper, whose message I did not read, private, for the other world listening. It was quite amazing to see all that. Well, another thing, more about my Yaya. I told you she appears in my books often. And watching The Sound of Music for the first time since I was a girl in my Yaya's den. I'm mesmerized by all the fabrics. Julie Andrews' butterfly sleeves, her seafoam green dress, the gentle swirling as she walks, all the pinafores, suspenders, and flouncy skirts, the ponderous drapes she yanked from their rods and transformed into play clothes for 7 children. The way my Yaya would, Perched at her mahogany Singer sewing machine, she could conjure almost anything. Long sleeves in 1 hour for her daughter's prom dress, pleated drapes for dining rooms, velvet Christmas dresses, wool jumpers, floral quilted bathrobes for us girls. Even my sister's wedding gown, 1,000 seed pearls planted by hand over months and months, a silken garden for my sister, from my grandmother, the water and the light that grew us. She really hand-stitched all those little pearls onto the dress. It was just incredible, just incredible. Oh, well, I think that whole experience of being in a space where there's art and beauty and reverence always makes me kind of want to go to sleep in a good way. And this also speaks to that. This was another poem from Italy, this time when we were in Florence. Notes from Italy. The dimples in David's knees. The veins pulsing in his hands. The flecks on Puccini's waistcoat, threadbare cloth of his piano seat. All the small bicycles folded and leaning outside shops, the laundry strung high in the air and wedged in between slats of tall green shutters. The cool vastness of Santa Croce, bones of Dante, Michelangelo, Galileo. The voice of the Italian guide whispering to his close group. How I closed my eyes to listen. Words I did not understand lulled me beyond sleep, near where Giotto's faded angel, frescoed onto the chapel wall, almost began to speak. Okay, well, I'll just read one or two more from Mothershell. Let's see. Yeah, one more from Mothershell. And you know how the experience you often have when you read a poem that affects you profoundly can almost change you in a way in the moment. This speaks to that experience. What the poem did. It became a spine, walked me upright into day. It hollowed out a room in me, a nave of light. Each word a gold moat, held in cathedraled air. I think you know that one, Kathleen. You almost said it with me. Should I read it again? Would you like me to? Okay.
Yes, read it again.
I'll read it again. It's just a little one. What the poem did. It became a spine, walked me upright into day. It hollowed out a room in me, a nave of light. Each word a gold moat, held in cathedraled air. Thank you. That's all from Mothershell. This book, came out in 2015 from Salmon. In Ink Like Early Twilight, it's a line from a poem in here about Keats. A lot of these poems in here come from my study of Keats and my trips to London. But there's more than that. But I will. Okay. This really happened. People have asked me, did this really happen? Yes. At Keats's home in Hampstead, there's a beautiful mulberry tree. Anyway, it was there during his time. It's very old. In the garden of Keats, I lay down in clover grass. My fingers dyed crimson from the mulberries I'd plucked off the low, winding branches that sprawled nearly to the poet's door. Even the ivory pages of my book were stained and smeared with a red I would never forget. Before the docent emerged from the house to tell me no, I must not pick. I must not eat the fruit off the ancient, perfect tree. And I relished that notebook with the mulberry stains. Kathleen, I think this next poem appeared in Escape into Life years ago. Praise Your Life. Is that correct? Didn't you publish it once? I think you did.
Probably. I don't remember anything now, but read it. And
okay.
Maybe it will all come back to me.
After returning from Rome, I was looking at a book of Caravaggio's paintings, and this came from that. Praise your life, when on a June morning heavy with rain, you can taste the best cappuccino since Rome. In a cafe with scarred maplewood tables, a book of Caravaggio splayed open, the calling of St. Matthew, that could be set in a tavern, a gambling den, a dank office where tax collectors are counting their day's work. While in the top right of the frame, a gold seared light slices in, and with it, the figure of a God-made man. A bolt of radiance shoots through his finger, pointed as if to say, you, it is you I have called to this life.
Yes, and I think we illustrated it with Caravaggio. Yeah.
I think you must have. It must have been in the public domain, yes? Yeah,
yes.
This was a while ago, yeah.
Yeah.
And I write a lot about, like I said, about the Greek thing and about not only my grandmother, but also my grandfather, who lived to 104. We call him Papuli for grandfather in Greek. And he used to tell me about his life there. A boy in Greece for Papuli. My grandfather was a boy in the mountains not far from Delphi, great navel of Mother Earth. He lived in a village encircled by a silvery green sea of olive trees and dust, and lit by a billion stars. He told me he could read by their light alone. I love to think of him under that luminous sky, eons before I was born to his gentleness. Even the darkness cradled him, a book creased open on his lap. Can you imagine being able to read by starlight? Just amazing. And so also from Greece, I imagined coming back from Greece, and what would the questions from the audience be? Some questions from the audience. Why so many cats? Are those bars on the side of the Parthenon? Did Socrates really swallow the hemlock in that cave? How many pillars make a temple? Why an owl on top? What did those urns hold? Is the water always see-through? How do the village houses, the steps, stay so white? What do those stones mean? Tell me how blue becomes that blue. Okay, should I continue with, I'll continue with Greece. Also, one of well, we've only been to a few islands, but the island I swear we loved the most was this little one called Sifnos. Walking in Greece, I'm surrounded by blue shining that nearly blinds. Whitewashed stones wind a path through the village. Old men at their tables, a pack donkey tied to a tree. Something in me feels even with the earth, the weight of sun that knows its strength. I climb the steep path, my grandmother's hands softly pressed on my back. And let's see here what they're here. Okay, I had a torn rotator cuff, and I had to go for physical therapy a couple years ago, and this poem, it's a long title, but when the doctor looked at the ultrasound of my shoulder and said, well, you have a 52-year-old rotator cuff after all. I thought of our dishwasher, born 26 years before we moved in. Just last week it coughed up its last spume of water. It gurgled, then stopped, just like that. The death rattle of silverware and dishes that had to be removed, laid in the porcelain sink and scrubbed by hand. My hands that, at 52, still oddly enjoy the splash of warm water falling on my skin, and the way soap bubbles sparkle under kitchen light. Such iridescent verve. I believe they would whistle if they could, though every second they are dying, and every second they are born. How much time is it? I've got a few more minutes here. My father at age 85 had a traumatic brain injury, which he made a long recovery from. Not total recovery, but enough for us to enjoy many times together. And we spent a lot of time in the beginning talking with the doctors, trying to figure things out. A long, deep run. The doctor of rehabilitation spoke to us of the marathon of my father's recovery from traumatic brain injury. Not a sprint or a 440, but a long, deep run. He spoke of jagged mountain peaks, one summit achieved, then another discovered ahead, awash in steep sunlight and snow. Rapt, I listened as the doctor described the terrible beauty and poetry of my father's life right now. And since he did recover, in a way that was, like I said, that was very generative, I'll read the poem of Victory, following my father. When I arrived to visit him, recovering from a traumatic brain bleed 7 months ago, my father is slathering his English muffin with peanut butter, slicing into his sunny side up eggs, because there are no tubes left in his chest, no hole anymore in his throat, and both his hands can do the work they need to do. In between bites, he asks, because he can speak now, about my daughter, my next book. Be sure, he says, to tell him when it comes out. Later, his hand grips the steel bars of the walker he uses to move away from the bed where he laid all those months in a space where we could not follow. I follow him now. Along the hallway of the wing, he will soon leave, the walker steering him onward, out toward his bright and waiting life. So that's for my good old dad. And I guess I'll just end with Keats, since I brought him up in the beginning. And there's Hampstead is where he lived, and this poem is literally the path to get to his house, but also, of course, it's a metaphorical path to him. But how to find Keats, Hampstead, London. Take Hampstead High Street before dusk, then left on Downshire Hill, 1 block until St. John's Church, where you'll veer to the right. Follow the narrow, stone-flagged walk to Wentworth Place. Gated and locked for renovation for much too long now. But still you must come, because it happens on this street. The living year, the year of the great odes. The blue darkening turns fluent with bird song. Everywhere their notes become like cursive crisscrossing, inscribing the air, ancestral nightingales. They have taken up his song. And that renovation, his home was closed for renovations for about 2 years, and I missed it on 2 different occasions. So I would sneak in. I finally got there. But so, yes, the living year is what they call the year that he wrote all the great odes, 1819. So isn't that a wonderful name, the living year?
The living year, yes.
So that's all I have planned to read, but if you want me to read anything else, or if you'd like to chat, whatever you'd like.
Let's do that. I want to thank you so much, Andrea. And for anybody who joined us in progress, we're talking with Andrea Potos, who just read some wonderful poems to us from her newest book, Marrow of Summer. I don't know if I'm showing right now or if they're all just seeing you.
I can see you.
Okay. As well as other books. And it was just wonderful. And these poems that you read about your mother and your father, and the joy of the peanut butter on the English muffin after a time of illness and recovery, they were demonstrating that aspect of the epigraph that you chose of, you don't have to show the world your pain, show them the joy of your tears.
Yes, it does. That's
stressing the joy of those everyday moments and those daily, everyday joys lets us feel that, as well as, of course, we realize later the loss. So thank you for sharing all of that with us.
Oh, it's my great pleasure.
And I was really struck with so many details from daily life, ordinary life, as well as the elaborate travels to Italy and, you know, seeing other lives, that it seems like poetry for you is a way of being for you, a kind of extension of your experience that it seems very natural to you. You bring in everything that you are living, feeling, seeing, tasting, the coffee, the machines, the coffee makers and the dishwashers are in your poems. So that's
there was a lot of coffee in there, wasn't there? Yeah, I like this. I like the sensual details. I gravitate towards that. But yeah, it is a way of being. Is a good way to put it, Kathleen.
Well, I'm glad to hear that, because that's how it seems to me. And right, when you talk about the sensual details, the sensory details, I'm going to go all the way back to something you said about you like the silky pages of certain notebooks.
Yeah.
And you think back on the mulberry stains of certain notebook pages. And so I'm wondering about your actual notebooks and your actual writing process. It sounds like, do you draft poems in a notebook? Do you take
yes. Only a notebook. Yeah. And sometimes notebooks with a hardback, like not leather so much, but just a more substantial. But sometimes spiral notebooks too, if they have the silky pages.
Oh.
And so I always write longhand. I adore writing longhand. And after I'm done with the poem is when I'll type it out. So of course this leads to a lot of course, many notebooks, and I don't keep them all. Some people do keep all their writing. I can't. I would have a room just of notebooks, right? Do you keep your stuff? Do you keep all your notebooks or all your things?
They are stacking up. I've got a notebook at hand, a diary. I keep diaries and anything books, and then I have some of those that are just for poetry drafting, and some are small enough that I carry them around. So I have stacks of notebooks around the house, like I have stacks of books to read.
Yes.
And now that I'm mentioning books,
yes.
you worked as a bookseller before. What kinds of books did you sell, and what kinds of books do you like to read?
Well, I worked at independent bookstores for 20 years, part-time bookseller. I was at a Room of One's Own feminist bookstore in Madison, and that we sold everything there. And then I left and went to the new bookstore that opened in Madison, Mystery to Me. It started as just mystery, but now it's much more than that. They've expanded. So general books, I like almost anything. I'm not a big science fiction reader, although I do love Ray Bradbury. But I'm a big fiction, some nonfiction poetry. I like travel books. I love children's books. I love young adult books. I love many books. I'm a book addict, right?
Yes, I understand. Me too, and it helped me get through the COVID isolation too.
Oh, absolutely. And then one book often will just lead to another. I'll read the index of one book and they'll recommend this, and it's just endless, right?
Yes, that's exactly how I do it too. Something will mention something else. You were when you talked about Italy and the beauty there, I was thinking how I read a Jane Hamilton novel this summer when Madeline was young.
Oh, I haven't read that one.
Well, it's inspired in part by a short story by Elizabeth Spencer, The Light in the Piazza.
Oh. Does it
Right?
take place in Italy?
Yes, and a movie was made about it back in 1963, and then an opera-like musical was made of it that was on Broadway. It's partly in English and partly in Italian. It's a love
Maybe.
story.
I think I need to read this book.
Yes,
Did you like it?
I liked it a lot. It's really it's a long short story. So The Light in the Piazza is a book of short stories by Elizabeth Spencer that has never gone out of print because it just seems to lead from one thing to another.
So Jane Hamilton's book is from that.
She says it was partly inspired by that, and there is important plot similarity, and I don't want to say too much more about that because, but it's just delightful.
When Madeline was young.
That's I think I've got the author right. The book is sitting on my stairs, but I think that's right.
Yeah.
And then Elizabeth Spencer. So yeah, so one book leads to another, leads to, I checked out from the library, the CD. The Normal Public Library has The Light in the Piazza musical, which is hard to come by. It was so I was delighted that we had it.
So, because that was done in the early 60s, you said?
No, the movie is from the 60s, and I think Yvette Mimieux was the innocent, beautiful young thing.
I remember her. She was in Joy in the Morning, I think.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Neat.
And Kelly O'Hara was in the musical, along with, if you ever watched Glee, the teacher in the high school where everybody's singing all the time was the beautiful Italian young man. Anyway, those are funny little details that just come from reading.
Thank you for telling me, Kathleen. I'm going to look those up because I'm in between books right now. I'm at that delicious point where you just finished one and you don't know what's coming next.
Right. And it's great when you read the right thing at the right time.
Absolutely.
I was struck by you talking about your poem about reading a poem that changes you, and I'm glad you read that to us twice. I have found that, and I'm glad that you like Emily Dickinson because a lot of her poems strike me and change me, and Louise Gluck, The Wild Iris, is a book
That's
where
a wonderful book.
all of the poems just got me. Yeah. So,
wonderful book.
Yeah. Now you, in your Italy poems, poems set in the Art Institute, and in your current book too, several of your poems are ekphrastic poems, poems that respond to art.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about how you write those poems? What are the challenges of writing a poem about a painting or about art?
Well, I don't. Yeah, when I see one in the museum, it doesn't happen right there. It'll be later, of course, upon reflection. But I look at a lot of art books too. Sometimes I'll start my writing time by looking at a book of art. And I think a challenge is not to read the description too much, not to read the description so that the poem doesn't just become the description of what you're looking at. But, I just, whatever begins to shimmer a little for me, that's what, and I'm using that word that, do you know the poet Christine Faulkner, Painter? She's wonderful.
Oh.
She lives in Galway. She's American, but she lives in Ireland. And she talks about looking for what shimmers for you. And that's when I know when a certain piece does. And I do tend to gravitate towards paintings that have light, lots of light, particularly gold light. Yeah. What did I just look at recently? Oh, yes, I was just in the Art Institute with my husband again, and I saw a painting of the icon of the Virgin of Tenderness. It was just a glorious, 15th century painting that was one of my recent ones. So I'm responding to light in some way. That's a good question. I think that's what it is.
Thank you. Yeah. And I love that you love cemeteries. So do I.
Yeah.
They're evocative in themselves, and
Totally.
walking through them is a kind of reverence.
Yes. Have you been to some interesting cemeteries?
Well, yes, locally, we're in the Normal Public Library, but we're Twin Cities with Bloomington.
Oh, okay.
And Bloomington's Evergreen Cemetery is a large cemetery that started as the old Bloomington Cemetery. And every year in the fall, they have a cemetery walk where actors bring to life some of the people who are buried there, everyday people and very famous people like Adlai Stevenson.
Oh, that's neat. That's charming.
Yeah, and it started as a way to help prevent vandalism to the gravestones, to remind the people who live here that, you know, these are your grandparents and people who helped build this community, and ordinary people like you. It is a park, but it's not a place to wreak havoc. And it turned into a wonderful, delightful way of learning our local history, and field trips of children come, and it becomes part of their curriculum. And college classes sometimes come. When I was teaching college, I brought my classes and let them write their own monologues based on someone who would be buried in their own cemetery. And I'm going to...
Oh, that's fascinating. That's wonderful.
Yeah, they are. Cemeteries can provoke poems indeed.
Yes, and I have a poem in the Ink Like Early Twilight where I met Keats's grave too. So I do go to a lot of graves.
Yeah. I wanted to tell you, you love Keats, and two of our local professors wrote a book about Keats recently, and back when we could meet live in the library, they read to us about Keats and told us about Keats.
Yeah, I want to know what those books are.
Sure. Yeah. I'll email you about that.
That sounds great. Yeah, it sounds great.
Well, Andrea, go ahead.
No, I was going to ask if we have any other questions. Was there
John?
any?
Right. John was checking earlier and hadn't seen any. I'll let him.
Okay. That'll be transferred. So the link on Facebook Live will be able to be sent out elsewhere, or will the YouTube be?
Well, on Facebook, our conversation and your reading will stay there, so people can click on that again if they weren't able to listen tonight. And John will also upload this video to the Normal Public Library YouTube channel, and yes, that will be a link that he can send us and you can send to your friends.
I will do that, yes.
Yeah.
Summer's a hard time for people to tune in sometimes.
Oh, right. But we get a lot of people who visit on their own time, and we're glad of it. So we're so glad you were part of our guest poet series tonight. And
I'm delighted.
Yeah. So next month is our open mic. That is August 17th. And our theme, to help people pick what they want to read, or maybe as a prompt, is Mother Earth. And your poems about the mother and your sense of ongoing life could inspire us, but the planet itself and the planet that nurtures us and that seems like we need to be nurturing too, might inspire some poems. Yeah. And then in September, we'll be back to our guest poet series. And then in October, our open mic theme is Gathering Hope. In November, we have the two Kellys in our guest poet series. And in December, our theme is hibernation and sleep. Yeah. So you should feel free to come back anytime you want to. Our open mic right now is just us in a Zoom room, and it's very pleasant
Sounds
and
lovely,
comfortable. Yeah.
Okay.
So Andrea Potos, thank you so much for reading to us tonight.
Thank you, Kathleen. It was an honor. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you, John.
Thank you, John. You did great. Good night.
Good night.